Hello everybody, new voice recording. So I forgot to add a little little aspect of Jamie. As you know, Jamie, she has night terror episodes. And yes, there's very intimate moments between her and Bill, and stuff. Even though Bill is not his real name, his actual name is Joseph Dorfe, because he works for the Vorderfiesel colony. But more on the whole physical aspect of it. So with Jamie, she tends to put up a brick wall and she tends to shut people down. Now, does she do that all the time? No, she doesn't. So with Jamie, so with Jamie, she is a victim of physical abuse because of the things that her father put her through, and then that whole thing. And so, like with Jamie, a lot of people have asked, well, if she's a victim of physical abuse, does that mean that she likes to be touched? Here's the thing with that. So there are times in the chapters in Broken Angel that she has very vivid night terror episodes, and so it kind of, in that retrospect, it kind of goes with this aspect of, victims of sexual and physical abuse, that because of the trauma that they have been through, sometimes they like physical touch. Sometimes they're fine with physical touch. Sometimes they're fine with hugs. But sometimes something could trigger those very unpleasant memories of when they were physically or sexually abused. That just something random can trigger that whole storage of very vivid, very, very bad memories of what they went through and how they were physically and sexually abused. And then, in those moments, they have this kind of natural instinct to just shut themselves down and to push people away, and to where the very concept of physical touch is it's sickening to them, and it terrifies them. And in those moments, it's best to just let them be. That if they're going to have a panic attack because they are brought to that dark place, just leave them be. You can still watch them and you can still monitor them, but when somebody who is a victim of physical and sexual abuse and something kind of triggers that storage of, bad memories of what they went through when they were physically and sexually abused, you can be there for them. Not saying you can't be there for them. You can be there for them, but just maybe in that moment they don't want to be physically touched. That you deciding to physically touch them, that could break them. And if they don't want to be physically touched because they're having that moment, then don't do it. Then don't physically touch them. Now, if they're kind of done having that moment and they clear their mind and they clear their mind and they clear their head and they're not in a dark place anymore, you can ask if you can give them a hug. You can ask if they want to be physically touched. But if they don't want to be physically touched because they're still feeling very, very uncomfortable and they're not quite out of that place yet, then don't physically touch them. Going back to Jamie, that's one of the things that Jamie does, is when she has her night terror episodes, they are very vivid, very, very vivid, and they bring back very, very uncomfortable memories for her of when her alcoholic father would physically abuse her and all of the facets of that whole situation. She's pretty shaken up. She is pretty shaken up, and she just kind of shuts herself down, and she pushes people away. And the very idea of physical touch terrifies her, and it makes her feel nauseous, and she doesn't want anybody fucking touching her. She wants no physical touch whatsoever in those moments. And Fred, who she sees as a father figure within the story, Fred respects that. Fred understands that, where he isn't going to push the whole concept of physical touch on her, where he realizes that after she has a night terror episode, that she's pretty shaken up, and that he just asks, are you okay? Do you need anything? Do you need water? Do you want to talk about it? If you want to talk about it, I'm here. But if you don't want me to touch you, or you don't want me to hug you, I will respect your wishes, and I won't do that. I'll give you space. And Fred is really good at doing that, with Jamie, because he understands that she has so much healing to do, and that, the trauma of what she went through, it haunts her. It haunts her, and it doesn't go away. And he understands that, a lot of people would look at her acting this way as, oh, she's just being selfish, or she's just being paranoid, or she's just being weird, fine, or she's just being such a bitch. That's not true. That's not true. That's not true. It kind of goes hand in hand with the concept of, okay, somebody who has been sexually abused, that you can be as intimate as you want with this person, because they are ready to open themselves up to you. They feel comfortable enough to open themselves up to you, and you can be as intimate as you want with them. But even in that moment of intimacy, if you do something that they're not okay with, that might trigger a very, very bad memory for them of when they were sexually abused, and then they might panic and freak out and do not want to engage in any sexual activity anymore, and they push you away. And it could be something that maybe you caress them in a way that makes them, or like maybe you caress them in a way that brings back a memory or triggers something as to, when their abuser would touch them in that way, or so forth, and that they might not want to do anything else and just kind of just scurry away and not want to be physically touched. And that goes hand in hand with victims of physical abuse, that yes, victims of physical abuse might be open to you physically touching them, but even with that comes its limits. Even with that has its limits, to where you might caress them on the arm the wrong way, or you might caress them on the leg the wrong way, and that might trigger some very, very uncomfortable memories of when they were physically abused by their abuser. And then they just tend to shut themselves down and push people away and just kind of hide back in their shell where they feel safe. They go into their safe place, and they have their moment of not wanting to be physically touched because they're just not feeling it anymore, and they're just kind of having their panic attack. And in that moment, or in those moments, it's better to just give them the space that they need. Give them the space that they need. Because in that moment, if you don't do that and you keep pressuring, physical touch on them when they've told you no, and they're kind of having their moment, and they're kind of going down that dark tunnel and trying to get out of that memory of when they were physically or sexually abused, if you pressure physical touch on them, they're just going to push you away even more, and then they'll want nothing to do with you, and then they'll feel like you're not a safe person anymore. They will feel like you're not a safe person anymore. I can't trust you because you're not giving me space, because I'm going through a moment of something triggering those very bad memories of when I was physically and sexually abused. If you pressure physical touch on them when they clearly don't want it, and they have clearly told you no, that could just end up having them push you away even more. So, going back to Jamie, amongst her complex personality, when she has night terror episodes, that's what happens, is she's just really, really shaken up. She kind of has her moments where she doesn't want to be physically touched, where she kind of shuts herself down, and even in those moments, Fred gives her space. Fred respects her space, gives her space, realizes that she doesn't want to be touched, she doesn't want to be hugged, she just wants to be left alone. And, he'll just ask her, like, if you want to talk about it, we can talk about it. If you don't want to talk about it, we don't have to. If you want me to give you some water to help you calm down, I can do that. But if you just want me to give you space, I can do that too. And in a lot of ways, that's why, Jamie sees her as a father figure. In a lot of ways, that's why Jamie sees him as a father figure that she's never had, because when she is having these panic moments, he does respect her space, and he does realize that she's kind of going through one of her episodes, and while she's going through one of her episodes, he doesn't pressure physical touch on her. He respects her space. And there are times where she does want Fred to hug her when she is going through these episodes, and doesn't push him away, and she's fine with Fred hugging her. But there are times where she just doesn't want to be physically touched. And with her, because she's a victim of physical abuse, that, it's kind of a way of her protecting herself, protecting her emotions, protecting who she is, and going into her safe place, if that makes any sense. So yeah, that's one of the other concepts of Jamie that I felt was important to bring up, with that whole physical touch aspect in, that whole situation. All right, cool. Bye.